Playing mobile games and not getting rewarded for it is a thing of the past. Why haven't you switched yet? If you're going to spend the time playing, you should be earning rewards doing it. With Missed Play, you play what you love and earn points for gift cards and more. Plus, you can enter the Missed Play sweepstakes for your chance to win tens of thousands of dollars in cash, bundles, and gift cards every week. So yeah, keep playing games. Just maybe get rewarded for it. Download Missed Play today and enter for your chance to win.
Hi, welcome to Crime Clueless. We're your hosts. I'm Jenna.
And I'm Laura.
Gresham, Oregon doesn't stop being Gresham just because one family's world stopped. The seasons keep turning. Mount Hood Community College keeps enrolling new students every fall. Kids who walk past a certain bronze plaque on campus without knowing why it's there, without knowing a girl named Barbara wrote those words for her father just weeks before she died. Susan, Barbara's sister, calls the police department every few months just to ask. The detectives on the end of the line change over the years. New names, new voices. They're always kind to her, but they never have very much to tell her. In 1989, Barbara's father, Albert, dies. 9 years, and he never learned what happened to his daughter. He spent every one of those years unable to even say her name out loud in his own kitchen. In 1995, Barbara's mom, Louise, dies too. 15 years. She's the woman who once wrote, "If it takes 10 years, I don't care." And it took longer than that. She never finds out either. And somewhere in a police evidence room in Gresham, sitting in the dark, untouched for 20 years, is a set of swabs collected the morning after Barbara's autopsy in January of 1980. Evidence nobody in that room in that year had any way to actually use. Then, in the year 2000, somebody finally does something with them. They're sent to the Oregon State Police Crime Lab. And out of them, technicians build something that didn't exist as a police tool back when Barbara was killed. A DNA profile of the man who did this. They have him. In the only way anyone can, 20 years later, but without a name attached. And then nothing. There's nothing to compare it to yet. There's not even a database built for this. No answer waiting on the other end. And so it goes back in the dark and it waits some more. This is part 2 of Barbara Mae Tucker's story. So that's the shape of those 20 years in broad strokes. But let's talk about them for a minute more, because I don't think it's fair to just skip past this part.
Yeah, I was already sitting with what you said about her parents and how sad that was that they had passed without ever finding out who or anything like that, especially her mom. Like, it doesn't matter how long it takes. I just want justice for this. And she didn't get to see that. And honestly, I was surprised.
Yeah.
That it even, when you said 20 years later, with everything that they had, the people who saw him, they talked to him.
Yes.
And we still can't figure out who he is yet.
Isn't that
20 years
wild?
later. Yeah.
I mean, some of these cases, you only have the DNA. You have no witnesses. You have no other evidence. And even then, a lot of times it doesn't take this long.
Right. I just can't believe that we have multiple people who saw him, one that talked to them, and we can't catch him.
Yeah, same. After losing both parents, it was kind of left to Barbara's siblings. So her sister Susan is the one who really kept fighting on her own. In 1993, so 13 years after the murder, a reporter caught up with her and she was still calling the police every few months for an update. And she just raised the reward for information to $7,500, which really in today's dollars is closer to $15,000. And that was out of her own pocket. She told the reporter, quote, "Instead of being angry, I want to act. There's nothing else I can do. I can't go out and apprehend the guy. I don't even know who he is." And about her mother, she added, My mother has just never been the same.
That's a lot of effort on her part, just calling every few months. It takes a lot to sustain that, especially when you're not getting answers.
Absolutely. I don't know how you do it, but also, I guess I can't imagine not doing it either.
Right. Yeah.
And here's the thing, Barbara's case wasn't sitting alone on a shelf either. Gresham, as a city, kept accumulating unsolved cases right alongside hers. And local papers kept revisiting all of them together, almost like a running feature, year after year. In 1982, there's a piece about how thin the small police department was stretched, trying to work Barbara's case at the same time as another unsolved murder. Actually, the college's own business manager was killed just 2 months before Barbara. By 1986, a detective is shown flipping through Barbara's file, which was 6 years old at that point. And at the time, it was one of 7 Gresham killings. The department had worked since 1980, and only
Wow.
4 had been solved. By 1989, 2 more names had joined the list, a 15-year-old girl named Jennifer Tucker and a 12-year-old girl named Mindy Thomas. Both were found in wooded areas close to the same campus within about a month of each other. Then there was a young woman named Ann Hansen who was stabbed walking home from her ski lift job. And by the mid-90s, a 5th name, a man named Roy Parson.
So, not just Barbara, there's an entire pattern of cases that aren't getting solved.
Right. That's exactly the picture that the local papers kept painting. In January of 1995, so the same year that Louise Tucker died, Gresham actually had a record for homicides. They had 11 of them, including the city's first ever triple murder. And in that same piece, the police chief at the time rattled off the same 5 names that had been unsolved for years: Barbara and Jennifer, Mindy, Ann, and Roy.
Oh, it's so crazy just to have those names on those lists for so long.
Yeah. And they weren't used to that. They didn't have
Yeah.
cold cases before that. And
Yeah.
as far as I can find, some of those other names are still open cases today. So we might come back to them sometime.
Wow. That's sad for their families.
Yeah, really devastating. I think it's important going into the rest of Barbara's story to just sit with that 20 years, that this wasn't a case quietly waiting on a shelf for technology to catch up. It was a wound this family, and honestly, the whole city kept carrying year after year with no end in sight. Susan making those calls, the bronze plaque that by that point, nobody walking past really understood, and a DNA profile now sitting in the dark with nothing to compare it to.
So, when does that change actually?
Well, not for another 20 years. And it changes finally because of something that nobody investigating this case in 1980 could have possibly imagined existing. So, quick refresher on where things actually stood technology wise before we get to 2021. Back in 2000, investigators had sent that DNA evidence that had been collected at the scene 20 years after the fact, but still, to the Oregon State Police Crime Lab. And they were able to get a DNA profile of this unknown suspect.
That's so great that they kept that DNA and kept it preserved for so long that they were able to get this profile from that. Because even though, I mean, like you said, back in 1980, they didn't even have this thought that that could happen from this. And yet they still collected it and saved it and preserved it so that they can get this profile, even though they can't match it, but got the profile 20 years later.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I'm always amazed that they're able to preserve it, even though they can't do anything with it and they don't know when or if they'll ever be able to.
Right.
So while a DNA profile is useful, it's only going to help solve it if you have something to compare it to. And in 2000, we didn't have a database. They didn't have a match. They had nothing to run it against. So it just sits there for another 21 years.
That's so frustrating. And I mean, you have the answer right there and no way to read it and nothing to do with it. And in the meantime, whoever did this is outliving his life for 41 years.
Yeah, that
And
part
her
is so
family is
infuriating.
trying to get answers. And yeah, it's
Yeah.
awful. But good that they kept it and had it and were able to eventually run this profile.
Yeah, right? So fast forward to 2021, Gresham police decide to try something that honestly, was not an option in 2000. They submit the same DNA profile to a service called GEDmatch, which we have talked about in a few other cases we've covered.
Yeah. So, like Christine Frankie's case or Nancy's case, which Nancy's case was even older than this one, and they kept that blood for so long and were able to catch the guy.
Yeah.
And Robin Lawrence and, Christy Merrick, all were cases that used GEDmatch.
Yeah, exactly. Good memory. And if you haven't heard of this before, GEDmatch is a database where people upload their own DNA results. So usually something they got from Ancestry or 23andMe, hoping to find relatives. Genealogists figured out that they could use that same database in reverse. So they can take an unknown crime scene DNA sample, and instead of looking for an exact match, they can look for distant relatives of whoever the DNA belongs to.
Right. So, not like, here's the guy, but maybe, at least maybe there's like second cousin twice removed or a distant family member that they can connect them to eventually.
I wonder if there's a case out there where they did find an exact match in GEDmatch, like somebody that had uploaded their DNA not realizing.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yes.
They're like, oh, I'm going to throw my DNA in ancestry.com. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Now we can find you.
I'm going to go search for that after this episode because now I'm really curious.
Can you imagine the police? They're like, oh my gosh, they're right here. It's an exact match.
Perfect. Boom.
Like,
done.
have a party.
Yeah, exactly. Now, in this case, the genealogist working on it is a woman named Cece Moore, who we've discussed before. She's the top in her field. She's a big deal and really good at what she does. She found a match that shared less than 1% of DNA with their suspect. Less than 1%, and that means it's an incredibly distant relative.
So, with that far away, seems like a giant puzzle for them to work with here.
Oh, for sure. Cece Moore said that it's a really painstaking process. Like you basically build out a family tree from that one distant match, branch by branch, and then you start narrowing it down using anything else you know. I mean, she's talked before about pulling out the phone book and going through it name by name. They look at the geography. Where would this person likely be living? They look at the age. How old would they probably be at the time? If they're only 2, obviously not our person.
Right.
And any other detail from the original case. And then you keep narrowing and narrowing the tree until ideally it converges on one person or, sometimes 3 people, whatever the case may be. Oh, that was the other one that we covered. She was stabbed in a parking lot and they found 3 brothers and they had to test each of them because they didn't know which one it was.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I still think that sounds like a super interesting job trying to solve a complex puzzle. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. It can take a really long time depending on what's available in the database. Cece Moore actually talked about this specific case afterwards and that it clearly got under her skin in a way most cases don't. She said, quote, "I've worked on hundreds of cases, but this case stuck with me unlike any other. I would wake up thinking about it and I would go to sleep thinking about it." And she said something else I thought was really honest. She said she doesn't think there's ever really closure for families in cases like this, but if the person's convicted, at least there's some justice.
Yeah, that's a really grounded way to think of it. Not too overpromising and Not this will make you feel better about it, but at least you can have some of that justice there.
Exactly. Now, through this process, the tree eventually pointed to one specific person, a 58-year-old man living in Troutdale, Oregon, which is just a few miles away from Gresham.
So they have a name now.
Yep, now we have a name. And that's what brings us to 2021. In Troutdale, Oregon, a man is biking along the Sandy River. He's 58 years old, bald now, built like someone who spends a lot of time outdoors, which he does, because he runs a little river guide business. He takes people out on tours of the water not far from his house. He's got a wife, he's got a son, neighbors who tell you if you ask that he's a nice guy. Quiet. Nothing about him would make you look twice. What he doesn't know is that he's being watched, and he has been for a few days now. A team of Gresham police detectives has been quietly tracking his movements. Never close enough to spook him, but close enough to wait. The man on the bike stops for a break. He's chewing gum. When he's done with it, he does the thing that, as much as we hate, is exactly what detectives need. He spits it out onto the ground and rides away.
Honestly, I don't know why people do that. When you step on gum and it's on your shoe, it's the worst thing ever.
It is the worst thing. It's so gross.
It's so gross and it's hard to get it off.
Yep. And then it's on the floor of your car.
Yes. I actually threw away a pair of shoes the other day from my daughter. They were older, but I'm like, this gum is not coming. I could not get it off.
Ew.
They were getting too small anyway, but I was like, these are disgusting.
Yeah, I can't donate these. I can't. No.
No.
Yep.
So gross. But I guess in this case, good thing he did because that's what they needed.
Yep. Because if you had thrown it in a garbage can, you'd never be able to conclusively make sure you found the right one. Yeah.
Yeah. Gross.
Yes. Now, the guy on the bike, he doesn't look back. I mean, why would he? But somebody else is looking and patiently waiting. Casually, this detective walks over, picks up that little wad of chewing gum off the dirt, and drops it into an evidence bag. The gum gets sent to the Oregon State Police Crime Lab and matched against the DNA profile that's been sitting untouched since 2000. And guess what? Perfect match.
Wow. That's so cool that they can narrow down that distant relative to this man and find him.
Yeah.
That's so cool to me. And
Me
so
too.
unfair that he's just been out there living his life for 40 years.
Oh my gosh, I know. So unfair after what he took away from Barbara and her family, and even the safety of the community. Awful.
So what? He was 17?
He was 16.
He was 16.
16. Yeah.
Wow.
But, snaps and props to CC Moore for
Exactly. Yeah.
finally finding him.
Amazing work.
Yeah. Now, the name that all the genealogy work pointed to was Robert Arthur Plimpton. Gresham detectives, along with a criminologist named Deanna Grossi, had been covertly watching him. Once they had that gum, they finally didn't need to guess anymore.
So do they need a warrant now to do this? Or I guess we've talked about if someone throws something away, it's not their property anymore.
Yes, exactly. So it's actually a really specific area of law. It does come up a lot in these genetic genealogy cold case breaks. There are basically two separate legal questions here, one for the watching and one for the gum. So first, the surveillance itself. Under U.S. law, police generally don't need a warrant to watch someone in public. So if you're out in the open, walking down the street, biking on a public trail, even sitting in a restaurant, courts have said that you don't have what's called, quote, a reasonable expectation of privacy in that. You're visible to anyone who happens to be looking. So detectives can quietly follow someone's public movements for as long as they want without ever having to go in front of a judge or, say, a warrant.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, anybody on the street could have seen him.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, all the reasoning behind it. The gum is slightly different legal question, but lands in the same space. This falls under something called the abandonment doctrine, which is what you said. Basically, once you voluntarily throw something away in public, courts have generally ruled that you've given up any reasonable expectation of privacy in it. And so far, that includes DNA. So if you spit your gum on the ground or toss a coffee cup in a public trash can, flick a cigarette butt onto the sidewalk, police can pick that up and test it without a warrant because legally you abandoned it.
Right. So basically the same rule with going through people's garbage too, right?
Yeah. Yes. Same principle. It's actually become a known technique in this exact kind of case. Investigators get a name from the genetic genealogy, and then instead of trying to compel a DNA sample, which does require a warrant, they just wait. They follow the person around in public until they throw something away on their own. It's sometimes literally called a trash pull in law enforcement.
Such a strange loophole. Yeah, it makes sense, but it feels kind of off sometimes.
Yeah.
When they're like sitting outside your house waiting for you to throw away your garbage. But when you put it out on the street, anyone can walk up and get it, right?
Yep, exactly. But kind of what you mentioned, it does feel a little bit off, and it's not universally settled forever. There are a handful of state courts that have actually started pushing back specifically on the DNA piece, arguing that genetic material tells you a lot more about a person than a coffee cup does, like health information, family relationships, things way beyond just this proved who touched this object. So there is some real ongoing legal debate about whether DNA specifically should get treated differently from regular trash. But as of Plimpton's case and in 2021, Oregon specifically, this method held up. Nothing in any of the trial or appeal coverage I found challenges the surveillance or the gum collection itself. His defense went after other things that we'll get into.
And don't a lot of times they get a DNA swab from them to actually have that comparison?
Yes.
So a lot of times they use that rather than the DNA that they collected from the gum or the piece of trash. They'll do a real swab in person and use that as the comparison.
Exactly. Because otherwise somebody could claim, well, that wasn't my gum, that wasn't my coffee cup. It's really just enough to get the warrant to get the DNA in the first place. Yeah, exactly. On June 8th, 2021, police arrested Robert Plimpton as he was literally driving away from his guide job.
So I was also thinking about, you said he was 16 at the time. Didn't a lot of the descriptions say he was like in his 20s?
Yeah. A lot of them said 20 to 25. Nobody at all said 16. At the time, he was a student at Reynolds High School, so he wasn't even a Mount Hood student, but he lived about half a mile from campus.
So this whole time, did he match any other parts of the description that they had or the drawings that they had?
Not even a little bit, which
I
have a hard time reconciling that, right? So he's a 16-year-old white kid, and they had really settled on olive complexion, Maltese or Italian, even Arabic descent. But it was none of that. The age was wrong. Not necessarily the build or the walk, but every single hypnosis session and months of interviewing everybody that had a night class, the whole time they're saying 20 to 25. They're saying also over 6 feet, right? They're saying olive complexion. And not one person said a teenager who really was pretty white, no olive complexion.
How tall was he?
That's the other thing. He's only 5'8".
Really? So she was taller than him
By more than 3 inches.
Wow. That's wild.
I'm not sure if people's minds just tricked them. Maybe she was leaning down a little bit, but for every single one of those witness descriptions to land on the same place, I mean, the face,
Yeah.
the picture, I could see how that does look like him, but none of the other details line up at all.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, that's crazy. Especially that detail of people saying he definitely was taller than her, even like the same height. It's not even close.
Right.
That's wild.
And honestly, we'll get into it more, but when we had the trial, even Plimpton's own defense in 2024 tried to use exactly this as a defense strategy. His lawyer stood up in court and argued that every eyewitness described a taller man than Barbara, and Plimpton is not just the same height, at least 3 inches shorter. Some things described her as 5'11 and a half.
Yeah. If people aren't actually paying attention, they're outside on the road. Was he standing on the curb and she's standing on the ground? There are ways that you can get around that.
Yeah,
Because if people aren't looking, they're not measuring him up to see what's going on. Maybe they're on an uneven ground.
agreed. But it is something.
It is. Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
Everybody said that. The people who looked at him and talked to him, but
Hmm? Yeah.
crazy. He has aged 40 years. Maybe he shrunk down a little bit.
I know. How tall were you at 16?
Did you have a spinal decompression or spinal injury that shrunk you down?
Right. Now, in 2021, Plimpton denied all of it and then asked for a lawyer, and bail was set at $500,000.
Do we know anything about who this guy actually was when he was 16? What kind of life he's been living over these 41 years?
Yeah, we do. We know quite a bit about him and his life between 1980 and his arrest in 2021. Court records show that he'd been convicted 3 separate times for fourth-degree assault, twice for kidnapping, plus a string of DUIs and traffic violations. When I was searching for him in newspapers, I found like 12, but there's also somebody else that lives in the same area that has the same name. And so it was kind of tricky to see if they were all his or if some belonged to the other person. But a lot of them did have the address on it and it had his age and the age matched up. So going from the late 80s all the way up to 98, I found at least one a year.
Wow. And twice for kidnapping. That's not nothing.
Right? It's not nothing. The most significant one happened in February of 1985. So he would have been 21. A woman named Patricia Spangler had accepted a ride home from the grocery store. Plimpton allegedly slammed her into the footwell of his truck and tried to bind her arms with duct tape. And somehow she managed to escape.
Oh, wow. That's wild.
Yeah. For that, he was sentenced to 2.5 years, which I don't know, seems like if he'd had his way, it could have been so much worse.
Yeah.
But Patricia Spangler actually testified at his 2024 murder trial. And she said, quote, "I could have easily been his next murder victim." She said she'd spent years afterwards just wondering what else he might have done in between.
That's such a haunting thing to carry around, knowing you survived something, but what that means about everybody else, not knowing what that means for the next person he decided to do that to.
Yeah, exactly. The second incident was right after he got out of prison in 1997. A different woman accused him of driving her to a secluded location and attacking her. He was arrested for attempted sodomy and assault. Court records say an officer found the woman crying and injured after.
What happened with that one?
Well, infuriatingly, the county DA's office dismissed the case, and court records don't actually explain why.
Oh, that is really frustrating. There's no like paper trail for the why or anything like that?
None that turned up in anything I found. It's just dismissed and no explanation on record. And if you're trying to reconstruct this guy's whole history, is a pretty significant gap.
Yeah.
Now, by the time he's arrested in 2021, Plimpton's married. His wife's name is Lisa. And Lisa and Robert actually knew each other back in 1980. They were both teenagers at Reynolds High School when Barbara was killed. Lisa was 15 and he was 16. They ended up married for about 18 years by the time of his arrest, and they had a son together.
So his wife is basically his high school girlfriend the whole time?
I mean, it kind of sounds that way, but those years mean that they wouldn't have gotten married till 2003-ish. So I'm not exactly sure. But Lisa gave an interview where she called it a shock and said he denied to her killing Barbara and said to the interviewer that he had been clean and sober for the last 25 years. And this is completely out of character. She said he told her he only knew about the Tucker case from news reports over the years. And she was at the time actively working on getting him a defense lawyer.
I don't know what to do with that. Like, on one hand, sure, people change over 25 years, but also she's saying he's only been clean and sober for the last 25 years. What about the 20 years before that?
Exactly.
15 years before that, whatever. And on the other hand, kidnapping, plural.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of wondering what she was going to say he was like in high school. So that's very interesting.
That part of it I didn't find, just that they dated and went to high school together, but no details about what he was like.
Yeah. And you can't really say that like, oh, they've been good for 25 years. This isn't who he is now. Okay. But who was he 41 years ago?
Right.
Because
when this happened.
That's very different.
Yeah. It's very different. And that would be really difficult. Somebody that you've known basically your whole life, but also been married to for almost 2 decades. And it is a shock to you at that point, but it happened 20 years before you got married. So I don't know.
Yeah. And you can get clean and sober and change and fix your life, but that doesn't change what you did before that time.
Exactly. Yep.
He could have been a completely different person with all these other convictions that we have. We know he was doing other things.
Right. And again, that's before DNA. So there could be other cases sitting there. And I'm not saying that they found any or linked him to any, but there could be other things sitting there that just haven't been tested yet.
Yeah, there could be.
Yeah. So both those things can be true at once. He can be a great guy, building a quiet family life, having a good job, and still have that in his past.
Have a past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If whatever he was doing, she said he's been clean and sober, was he drinking and on drugs at that time?
And that I don't know.
And things that you're doing when you're living that life can be very different than what you're living now.
Oh, agreed. For sure.
People change, absolutely. But that doesn't erase your history.
It is interesting, though, when we have these stories and they're somebody that has this whole life now, and nobody is saying that they're this obviously evil guy that everyone should have noticed or, had on their radar, just because 40 years is a long time.
It's a long time. And if they'd had this technology 40 years ago, would people be telling this? Would they be saying this story?
Right.
People who remember him back then,
Yeah. Now, 2 of Barbara's friends actually gave interviews right after the arrest, and it kind of feels like a little bit of whiplash for her family and friends. One of them, a woman named Maureen, said the violence with which she was killed was just so horrible. To be almost 60 years old and find out that they kept looking, I'm just so grateful. And another friend, Maria, who was more cautious, said, I'm going to wait patiently until the grand jury comes back to say whether there is enough evidence to prosecute. He could walk free. We don't know. And in 2021, the DNA and the cold cases, that was still pretty new. Some of those first ones weren't that many years before, and a lot of people didn't know the cases could be solved by DNA. I still think a lot of people are not as aware that this is happening so often.
Yeah. And I think that second statement is interesting too. And I wonder if some people had that feeling because he didn't match the description. I wonder if some of them were maybe questioning it all as well, if they even have the right guy.
Right. And a 16-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Now, the trial itself doesn't happen until 2024. 3 years between the arrest and actually going to court, which is its own kind of long wait for the family.
After 41 years already, that is brutal to wait 3 more years for a trial.
You get to find out there's finally an arrest and then sit and wait again. Plimpton's defense team makes an interesting choice right off the bat. Instead of a jury trial, they opt for what's called a bench trial, which means there's no jury at all, just a single judge, a woman named Amy Baggio, and she hears everything and decides the verdict herself.
Is that a common thing to do?
I mean, it happens usually when the defense thinks the evidence is more likely to land well with a judge than with the jury's kind of gut reaction or the emotional reaction. And sometimes DNA-heavy cases do tend to go this route. On the prosecution side, you've got Chief Deputy DA Kirsten Snowden and Senior Deputy DA Todd Jackson. The defense is a father-son team, Stephen and Jacob House. The prosecution's case is straightforward. We have a DNA match. We can prove the chain of custody, the gum-to-lab pipeline we already talked about, and I'm sure that they got a DNA swab once they arrested him. The defense strategy is actually pretty aggressive. I do want to talk about it, even though some of it's uncomfortable. So first, they tried to introduce a 40-year-old taped police interview where a friend of Barbara's had told investigators back in 1980 that Barbara had had one-night stands. The defense's angle here was to argue that maybe what happened between Barbara and Plimpton was consensual.
How that feels like a pretty ugly move, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when he's already saying they never had done anything. He didn't know her or anything like that.
Yep.
So using something from 40 years ago about her personal life just feels
agreed.
icky.
Yep. I think that is a fair reaction. And, this is a pretty well-worn defense tactic in cases like this. So it's worth naming exactly what it is. And I hate it. I hate it every time when they try to smear the victim as a defense strategy. They also tried to get a state medical examiner's testimony struck, testimony saying that sexual assaults don't always leave physical evidence of trauma. So basically trying to use the absence of certain physical evidence as proof that nothing non-consensual happened.
Even though didn't they say that there was evidence that she had fought back, that there were marks on her hands?
Yeah. And I feel like the obvious rebuttal to that would be she had blood and mud on her face that eyewitnesses saw. She's in the street trying to get away from this man. But I feel like that's a hard thing to argue when all of those witness descriptions were wrong about him. So I don't know how you can say they were right about one and wrong about the other, which makes it tricky.
Yeah, I think so too. And the other part is, I guess they could be arguing maybe she had consensual relationship with him and then someone else murdered her. Is that what they're saying?
Yes. I think they're trying to separate the two so that the only question is whether he murdered her or not. So I think they're trying to say this DNA of his is from whatever happened with him earlier in the day, and it was consensual.
Yeah. So they're saying, like, yes, he was with her and they did this consensually, and then someone else did the murder.
Exactly.
That's what they're trying to argue here.
Yes. Yep. So they're saying we can point to the DNA. Yes, that was his, but he wasn't the one that murdered her because all of these eyewitnesses saw her with someone taller, saw her with someone with olive complexion. He even had a little bit of red hair at the time. And most of the eyewitnesses said dark hair.
Yeah. But they also said he had a cap on.
Right.
That's hard.
Agreed.
To say exactly what his hair color is, only like the eyebrows.
Yes. Which can be different from hair.
Yeah. And if your cap is low, it could be hard to see that. And if you're seeing someone that you think has an olive complexion, maybe you assume that the eyebrows you saw in the dark were black.
Yep.
You know?
100%. Now, when he was very first brought in 2021, and they're interviewing him about this, he specifically in that interview denied ever having sex with Barbara and then asked for a lawyer. So that seems like kind of a hard thing to reconcile too. How are you saying, yes, they did and it was consensual when he flat out denied ever doing anything with her, right?
Yeah.
And part of this actually works somewhat for where the verdict lands, at least partially. Now, we mentioned that the heightened appearance argument were part of the defense's strategy as well. And that's the other thing that they really hammered on during trial. And an actual quote from his attorney, he said, quote, "It's as if we have a video camera catching the crime in progress. We see the man who killed her. He's a tall man. He's as tall or taller than Barbara Tucker," end quote.
Right. And he's only 5'8". So
exactly.
There could be so many things to describe that away.
Yeah.
Depending on how they were standing, what they were doing, were they on a hill?
Right.
Things that the witnesses didn't notice.
Right. And, you know, cars are just like trying to go around them. And you might just think he looks taller than she does. I don't know. But yes, I agree.
Yeah, that is a big difference, though. I think that would be noticeable. So that is a genuinely strong point for the defense, right? It's not nothing, the height difference and the discrepancy between the eyewitnesses there and the actuality of it.
Yeah, you're right. It's not nothing. Now, here's something that I think is a fascinating piece of courtroom strategy. House, the defense lawyer, didn't actually try to challenge the DNA himself. He never said the science was wrong. He basically stood up and said the DNA evidence was, quote, "a bright, shiny object," meaning something so compelling that it distracts everyone from these other very real inconsistencies underneath it.
And that is a clever line, honestly, even if I don't think it should work, but.
Agreed. It is a good line, and I also don't think it should work. It's interesting. I tried to find Barbara's full day because this happened at 7. And they were saying that basically within that 12 hours, she had either been with someone else or she'd been consensually with Plimpton. You know, she went to the gym, she went to the sauna, she was with her friend. I couldn't really find if she had classes in the morning. It still seems like a stretch, though, to say that this happened some other time during the day while he was at high school.
High school?
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. They should be able to see if there's some record if he's marked truant from school or something, or if he was at school all day long.
Right. Because then there is no time for that based on the
like
timeline.
At 3 p.m.
Right. But that's when she was going to the gym with her friend.
Yeah.
So I couldn't find like her morning, but then you think about him being in high school on a Tuesday and.
Yeah, unless he was not at school,
right.
Which is possible.
Yeah. But if I were the prosecutor, that is something I would have been looking for. Absolutely.
Yes, his high school records, his attendance records, if they still have those 40 years later.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either.
Probably not. I don't know why you would keep them. But
yeah, and it probably was not digital back then. So,
right. During trial, no one from the DNA lab, Parabon, testified. The state really just leaned directly on this DNA match to the crime scene. They said that Parabon had told them the match was about 1 in 650 quadrillion odds of being wrong. So the DNA is his for sure, which makes sense that the defense attorney didn't even want to question the science because how could you?
yeah.
So here's where it lands. On March 15th, 2024, the judge delivers her verdict. He's guilty on 1 count of first-degree murder and 4 counts of second-degree murder. And those are just different legal theories covering the same act. And this is where their consensual sex argument actually did some work. He was not convicted on the rape or any kind of sexual assault counts. Prosecutors, she said, couldn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the assault happened either consensually or even while Barbara was still alive.
So they're saying he's guilty of killing her, but not officially guilty of assaulting her.
Yeah, legally, yes. That's exactly the distinction. And it's not that the judge didn't believe the assault happened. Remember, the original 1980 medical examiner said outright that it was obviously a case of sexual assault. It's specifically about proving the timing beyond a reasonable doubt. And I guess 44 years after the fact, with the person responsible not talking, it was too high of a bar to clear. And I'm sure she was trying to protect it from appeals that maybe could have gone through and had parts of it overturned.
Yeah, such a strange technical thing to have to sit with. He did it, but not on the record, that kind of specific way.
Yeah, it really made me rage when I was reading the newspaper articles that were really laying that out because it's that smear campaign that worked and they're not able to fully prove it. So I don't know. It's a really uncomfortable legal aspect of it. And honestly, I don't think there's a clean way to make it feel resolved. Also, he has maintained his innocence the whole way through. Even after the verdict, he was quoted saying he didn't match the original description of the man seen pulling Barbara into the bushes, and that there was no evidence that he and Barbara even knew each other, which, by the way, is kind of the opposite of what you're trying to say as a defense attorney. Like, you're trying to say it was consensual, but now he's going on record saying they never even knew each other. So I don't know if he doesn't understand the legal strategy there or what, but even the prosecutors weren't able to find any connection between him and Barbara. The state's whole theory was a stranger attack and that he picked a girl he had never met.
That's almost worse in a way. There's no story there, no motive that you can even try to understand. Just some kid attacking a woman he's seeing walking to class.
Yeah, exactly. Stranger attack, no motive, just close to his own house, and honestly, gets away with it. As, teenagers aren't always the smartest. And the fact that he was able to get away with it for 41 years, kind of mind-boggling.
Does it change anything that when this happened, he was 16?
So that is a great point. It does come up. We'll talk about it in just a second with sentencing.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's the thing too, right? If he's in his 20s, he's an adult then, he's an adult now, where being a 16-year-old, sometimes they're tried as adults, but not always.
Yeah.
Sentencing happens about 6 months after the verdict on October 3rd, 2024. They have a different judge this time, a woman named Kelly Skye. During the closing arguments, the prosecutor Snowden read something that Louise had written way back in 1980. So Louise had a baby book for Barbara, and after the murder, on a blank page, she wrote, quote, "Barbie, Your mommy loves you and misses you so very much. I just pray that they will get them soon. And that was really emotional in the courtroom.
That's so sad that Barbara's mom never even got to see this justice play out or find out what had happened or who it was or anything like that.
Yeah, awful. The fact that she never got to see justice, so heartbreaking. Todd Jackson, the other prosecutor, made a broader point in his closing too. He said this crime, quote, had not just destroyed a family, but riven the peace of Gresham, then a small town surrounded by farms and fields. And then he said, quote, the depravity, the viciousness, the extreme violence, you can't describe in words the level of violence that this crime involved. You have to see it, end quote. Now, at that same hearing, the defense is asking for parole eligibility after just 20 years, arguing something called, like you pointed out, the transience of youth. So basically, Plimpton was a kid when he did this, and he shouldn't be judged forever by who he was at 16. They also pointed out that he hadn't been in any legal trouble since the 1990s.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that legal argument about him being a minor, but he does have 2 kidnappings and other convictions in the years after that don't really scream transient youth to me.
Agreed. I think that's fair pushback. And Patricia Spangler, the woman from the 1985 case, testified a second time at this hearing too. And she said the same line as before. I could have easily been his next murder victim.
Yep, exactly.
In the end, Judge Skye sentences him to life in prison with a minimum of 40 years before he's eligible for parole. And here's an important detail that's actually double the standard mandatory minimum under the sentencing guidelines that applied back in 1980, specifically because he was a minor at the time of the crime. So the judge made a deliberate choice to go further than the baseline, given everything else in his record since then.
Wow. So he'd be over 100 by the time he's even eligible for parole.
Yeah, just about. Because I'm not sure if that includes for time served. So he'd either be 98 or 101.
Yeah. And that's it feels significant that that was the amount of time that he was out free after this happened.
Good point. I thought the same thing. Now, in the courtroom, Barbara's 2 surviving sisters cried when the sentencing was done. At one point, another relative stood up and demanded that Plimpton actually face them. He didn't say anything. He just took off his glasses and kind of rubbed his forehead. And that's a picture that's in a lot of the articles about the sentencing from October of 2024. Afterwards, outside the courthouse, one of Barbara's sisters said, I don't think he'd had any remorse, any regret, any conscience. I never thought we'd see this day. And Barbara's brother-in-law, Robert, kept it short. He just called the whole thing sadistic.
After everything we walked through today, the sketches, the false leads, 40 years of nothing, that word actually feels earned, not like dramatic, just accurate.
Yeah, I think so too. So let's zoom out for a second before we close this one out. It's easy, especially after a trial and a sentencing, to end on Robert Plimpton, on the verdict, the 40 years, all of that. But I don't think that's actually where this story lives. I keep coming back to a couple of things from way earlier that we talked about in part 1. That neighborhood watch program, the one a woman named Sharon Kelly built almost 50 years ago now, just because she'd read about what happened to Barbara and couldn't sit still with it. As far as I can tell, that kind of thing, a citizen watch program born directly out of one specific unsolved murder, is still a concern in some form in that area decades later.
That's kind of remarkable, actually. Something good that just kept existing long after the case that she created it from went cold.
Right. And that bronze plaque is still on the Mount Hood campus with Barbara's words written on it. I do feel like this is not a clean story. You know, the investigation was full of good faith effort, but it kind of pointed in exactly the wrong direction. for such a long time. And, the person responsible was a kid, not a monster in a ski jacket. Justice did eventually arrive, but it did come too late for a lot of the people who loved Barbara and wanted that justice the most. So that is it for our two-parter on Barbara Mae Tucker. It's a really sad case. It's one you think would be solved right away.
Yeah. And it really is an interesting point once we find out who that DNA belongs to, that he doesn't match all of that from what they said back then. It's really wild case there.
Yeah.
We know that DNA matches him. We know he was there.
Yep.
But how they got it so wrong from all of those witnesses. And I think you said this in part 1. Did someone see him at a weird angle and say he was tall? And people heard that, and that's what they all of a sudden remembered too.
Mm-hmm.
Did all of those descriptions cloud what other people thought they saw?
Right.
Because if they're like, I thought he was shorter, but 8 other people said he was tall, so I guess I saw it wrong.
Exactly. That's that weird balance between putting it out there versus holding it back to kind of compare them without, like you said, the other descriptions clouding their memory.
Yeah. And really, 5 days later, how do you accurately, my memory's terrible. There's no way I could be like, oh yeah, they look like this, they were this tall. Like, there's no way I could do that. But if someone else's description is in my mind, that would probably give me that same thought too.
Totally.
So I do agree with what you said in the first part. I think putting all of that out there right at the beginning did cause some of those challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone else who saw him didn't see it that way, but they thought they did.
They thought they did.
Who knows?
Exactly.
That's the problem with eyewitness too.
Yes.
What you hear is what you see, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your mind can do incredible things.
Yeah.
It can change how you see things, I think. So, and how you remember things.
Right. And, sometimes they're getting these descriptions weeks or months later. They got so many the next day.
Yeah.
It is crazy that those ones were wrong. And then whatever happened, either everyone was wrong or
they remembered wrong. I don't know. Or maybe when you're told the woman you saw was murdered, you don't see a 5'8" kid. You do see, like you said, a monster in a ski jacket.
Mm-hmm.
Your mind does incredible things.
Yes, absolutely.
We've been talking about that a lot with my kids who can't go to sleep at night because they're so scared. Your mind is the director.
It is.
It can make up what it wants. It's making those scary dreams. It can change things, how you remember things.
Yeah, agreed. And like I said, I do think the face, the sketch, does resemble him that they got from hypnosis. But those other details, not so much.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is the brutality of the murder, hearing it was a murder.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to, I think you can remember things differently when you put that in your mind. This was some guy who attacked her and did this malicious thing and was very violent. He's got to be like this,
Yeah.
I don't know.
No,
that's
absolutely.
just that's Laura's personal thoughts.
I like Laura's personal thoughts. I agree. There's a reason that they were all wrong.
Yeah.
I don't really think it's what the defense said. I don't think it was someone else.
No, I don't think so either.
I mean, and we can say that because it's a guilty verdict and he's in prison. So,
right. Be interesting to hear from people who were eyewitnesses back then, once they saw him now, what they thought, what their thoughts were after seeing who it was.
Yeah, that I didn't read anywhere, but that would be interesting if maybe it sparked a memory change or something.
Yeah, because I'm sure a lot of those people are still in the area or had been following this case. I bet they were invested to find out what happened, or they still live in the area and saw it on the news.
Yep.
Remembered seeing that and giving the eyewitness account.
I could even see investigators trying to go back to them to have them come to trial or to get another statement.
for
something.
sure.
Yeah.
And I could see the defense trying to do that too.
Yes, 100%. Please get up on the stand and say he was 6'2" and had dark hair and olive complexion. Like, great.
Yeah.
Because now that's 6 inches off.
Yeah.
That's a lot. I don't think people think I'm 5'8" ever, you know?
No.
No.
I think it's a very interesting case. I'm glad that it's a solved one and they were able to find him and that they did save that DNA all those years and were able to catch him.
Yes. There are cases that I've read about recently where they pull that out to test it and it's been stored in plastic, which introduces moisture. And, you know, they could have never known that back then, but it's unusable.
Yeah.
So we got lucky on a lot of accounts here.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, if you want to read any of the articles that we referenced or learn more about this case, you can read our full write-up and see all the sources that we used on our website, crimeclueless.com. If you enjoyed this one, the most helpful, best, free, fast, easy thing you can do is to leave us a rating and or a review wherever you're listening. It helps more than you know. And we'd love to connect with you on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. Just search for Crime Clueless. We're the same on all of them. If you haven't followed us on YouTube yet, we'd be so grateful if you would subscribe to our channel. We're trying to grow that, and that really will help. As always, remember, refuse to be clueless, careless, or caught off guard.
Not today, murderers.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.